Kirsten ran against Republican Juan Ciscomani in Congressional District 6 in last November, and she lost in one of the closest congressional races in the country. She was outspent by the Republicans 6-1 in the closing weeks of the campaign. But the good news is she's back. She's announced that she's launched her 2024 campaign to regain CD6, and she will speak about issues that mean the most to her and how she intends to win. So without further ado, let's hear from Kirsten Engel.
Okay. Thank you so much. Good evening to everyone. And thank you very much. I am running for Congress again. I'm running for Congressional District 6. As Larry said, we missed it by just a hair. This was the 6th closest congressional race in the United States. We missed it by 1.4%, a little over 5,000 votes. I am running to finish the job. With your help, we can win this district and we can restore our Democratic majority back in the U.S. House and also restore sanity and decency to the U.S. Congress, because that is absolutely not what we have now. Since Kevin McCarthy and his MAGA Republicans took over, and with the full support of my opponent, Juan Ciscomani, voting with them every step of the way, let's just look at what we have and what they have done and what they have not done. They have threatened to default on our debts and trash our economy, not to mention global financial markets. They haven't done a thing to make healthcare or childcare more affordable so people can work and actually support their families and contribute to our economy. They have protected the profits of big oil corporations and polluters, but they haven't supported our growing clean energy sector, which is creating good paying union jobs across Arizona and America. They have protected George Santos and Donald Trump, people who do serious damage to our democracy and our freedoms, but they haven't restored women's fundamental freedom to make our own healthcare decisions about our bodies. And they haven't restored our sense of independence and bodily integrity. My opponent, Juan Ciscomani, talks a lot about the American dream. Most recently, he talked about this in Spanish in response to President Biden's State of the Union speech. And I very much appreciate that he gave that speech in Spanish. I know it meant a lot to so many members of our Hispanic and Latino communities. But what I don't appreciate is his gloating that he has achieved the American dream, all the while committed to a party and policies that slam the door on the ability of others to achieve that same dream. And what makes it worse, his party is not only destroying the ability to achieve the American dream, they're destroying the dream itself by coddling fascists, white supremacists, anti-Semites, and by sowing hate and division. Unlike my opponent, I'm running to renew the American dream for all, so we can once again have a nation that protects fundamental freedoms and dignity. And chief among these is the fundamental freedom to make our own healthcare decisions, so we can decide whether, when, or how to have a family free from the meddling of grandstanding politicians and Trump-appointed judges. And with the GOP now trying to shut down abortion in the states, having succeeded in eliminating the constitutional right to an abortion, congressional action guaranteeing abortion access is more important than ever. And as a woman, as a mom of a teenage daughter, this issue is personal to me, very important to me, and it is fundamental to my 2024 campaign. I'm also running to secure our water future by managing our water resources according to the reality of climate change. Yes, we need to fight for our fair share of the Colorado River in Washington, but we also need to institute smart water policies here at home. And We cannot be just leaving ourselves open to foreign corporations like Saudi Arabia to be pumping out our groundwater. We need to be tackling the climate crisis, which is behind our drought conditions. And we can do so with smart policies and ones that create jobs. I'm also running to protect Social Security and Medicare and follow through with our promise to our veterans by ensuring they receive quality health care. We can't afford to let Juan Ciscomani and the Republican extremists play games with Arizona's water future, our children's future, or the dignity of our seniors. We can't afford to let them continue to push away and not listen to the pleas from parents for gun safety measures. We can't afford to let them continue to put the profits of big corporations above that of families and small businesses. I'm not going to stand by and let Ciscomani and the GOP take us backwards. We came damn close last time. This time, we're going to finish the job. So I have given this presentation to a few different legislative districts to talk a bit about our water crisis and get everybody situated into what we're actually dealing with and what are some of the problems and what are some of the solutions. Part of the crisis is coming from the fact we live in a desert, but we refuse to accept the reality by not accepting that a desert is a place of little water and that we have to live within that. We have all kinds of infrastructure to try to overcome our lack of water in this desert, but we're seeing the limitations of that right now. Climate change is driving our current drought conditions. I think we have to accept that it's only going to get worse. We did have a very wet year this last year, which has given us a little bit of a reprieve from some of the most draconian cuts that we need to make in our Colorado River use. We will have these kinds of fluctuations, but the overall trend is toward drier and hotter conditions. Finally, we have to get away from this idea that some of these pie-in-the-sky proposals, from trucking water from the Mississippi to building several billion-dollar desalination plants in Mexico, are going to save us from our current water problems. The water issue, they're all interconnected, and we're all struggling because of these drier conditions, but there really are three sort of systems of water that are connected. There's the Colorado River, there's Arizona surface waters, and then there's groundwater. So I wanted to talk about each of these. This is a slide that shows us where our water is coming from. And you can see basically Colorado River and groundwater is where we are getting most of our water. This shows us who is using our water, what sector is using our water. And by far, agricultural use is the biggest. It really dwarfs everything else. Of course, it's important. Agriculture is food, but I think we also know that agriculture has also made a lot of decisions as a result of market trends that maybe are not sustainable for the future in terms of how much of agriculture is devoted towards growing crops such as alfalfa for ranching. It truly dwarfs a lot of the food crops that are grown. And not all of them are really that water smart. The Colorado River has taken most of the big headlines. I know that just a couple of days ago, we had a breakthrough in the states coming up with a plan for reducing their Colorado River use. This was under the threat of the federal government doing it for us. The federal government had said that all of the states together, Upper Basin and the Lower Basin, had to come up with reducing 2 to 4 million acre feet. That's basically something like 25% of the total water use today. And this most recent proposal kind of short circuits that. It sounds like the federal government is on board. There is a lot that we don't know about this most recent agreement. It's good news that the states have actually made some progress in reducing their water use by apparently 3 million acre feet by 2026. It's not as quickly as the federal government has wanted, but it looks like the federal government is okay with it. The biggest concern I have is whether this is instituting some kind of permanent shift in terms of how we're using water, or we're just going to use all the money that was appropriated by Congress in the Inflation Reduction Act to basically buy off our farmers to not plant crops. That would be, to me, a monumental waste of that inflation reduction money. Yes, we do need quick cuts, but we need to use that money to help our agricultural sector move towards more sustainable farming practices by using things like drip irrigation and to build up markets for low water crops, and not just to pay them not to plant anything at all. The bottom line here is just to understand that although there's something like 16.5 million acre feet that's been allocated in the Colorado River, we've only been getting something like 12 million acre feet of water running down the Colorado River. This water has been allocated among the states and Mexico, but it doesn't include the tribes, only some of which have settled their water rights with the federal government and the states. The groundwater situation is equally dire as a result of our 1980 Groundwater Protection Act. We really only have regulation and monitoring of groundwater withdrawals in the most populated areas of the state. It's basically just the Wild West outside of that. We do have an important development that happened in 2020, where the citizens of Douglas put an initiative on the ballot to make one of these active management areas in their region. So we now have a citizen-created active management area where water withdrawals are monitored and limited, but that is very unusual, and the rest of the state is not regulated. So we have vastly different regulatory regimes, and even in the areas where it is regulated, we are not doing a very good job. There's still sinking water levels. This is a slide on a situation that Chris Mays has been talking about a lot and has been addressing. That is the open season that has prevailed in some of the farming areas where we have not just Saudi Arabian, but other big farming entities or ranching entities that are pumping out vast quantities of groundwater without any regulation. This is the Saudi Arabian firm Fundamente that is pumping groundwater on leased land from the state in order to grow alfalfa and then ship that back to Saudi Arabia to feed their cattle. We also have a very serious problem in terms of groundwater contamination with those forever chemicals, PFAS and PFOS, which come from a flame retardant chemical that was used in industry, mostly often by the military. So it's coming from a lot of our military bases. There is federal money that we're competing for in order to clean this up. But of course, the most important thing is to prevent it from getting to our groundwater in the first place. And we're not doing a great job at that. Surface waters, which are so critical to wildlife habitat here in Arizona, also critical to our tourist industry, which is important to our economy. Many of our in-state waters are struggling right now as a result of climate change, as well as overpumping of groundwater and the connection between the groundwater and the surface water. Very important here, the Clean Water Act regulation that the Biden administration is pursuing could mean a lot in terms of whether so many of Arizona's surface waters are actually covered by federal regulation. Okay, there's a lot of solutions out there. Everything in our agricultural sector to installing drip irrigation, switching to low water use crops, increasing our water reuse and reclamation, building water storage facilities, conserving our water, making sure that new building is net zero in terms of its water use, completing our tribal water settlements, very high priority, and protecting and monitoring our water across the entire state. There's a lot of good developments out there. Congress seems to be fairly engaged in this. We have to continue that. That's one of my priorities in running for Congress. And of course, we've got the citizens, such as the citizens in Douglas, who are able to regulate their groundwater. So there's a few bright spots out there as well. Okay, we'd love to know who would like to help us in the future. And you can invite me to talk to folks. You can send me your ideas and what you would like to see for our important district. Thank you for having me.